Yeah, so my presentation is called Tooltime, and I couldn't think of any awesome 90s jokes, but, you guys can have your way with that. And yeah, it's all about embracing Xcode and how we can make our dev environments work more for us. I'm here sponsored by WillowTree, which if you talked to me yesterday, I probably talked about WillowTree. That's where I work. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity for them to pay for me to come down here. And yeah, if you have any questions about where I work or what we do, please come talk to me. A little bit about me. My name is Melissa, and as John said, I spoke last year at 360 iDev after some arm twisting. But I'm back, and so I hope it's even better than last time. I started programming in 2012, and I started getting into mobile in 2014. And in 2014, I started actually interning at this company called BMW, and I actually started there as an Android developer, true story. And I met this guy named Ryan who worked there, and he was an iOS developer, and he was so passionate about what he did and his platform and his software, and I was like, who is this guy and why does he love this so much? So I was like, maybe I should learn this. So that summer I started iOS, and then that's when Swift came out, and when Swift came out, I never looked back, and I was like, iOS is the way to go. So then in May, I graduated from school. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University up in Richmond, Virginia, and in June I started my job at WillowTree. And actually on the first day of my job, the VP of engineering asked if he could grab me for a second. He wanted to talk. I was like, cool, sure, first day, hopefully couldn't have done anything wrong yet. And he's like, so, I know we talked about iOS, and I know, you have some Android experience, and I know it's on your resume. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's correct. And he was like, so we have this project going on. It's about to ship. We really need you on Android. Can you do it? And in my head, I'm like, I can't do Android. But what I said was, yeah, I can do Android. And so then it was day one of my first job ever, and I had to do Android, and I was like, what have I done? This is going to be awful. So I learned a few things that day, and through that whole experience. The first thing I learned was, even if you do know something, if you aren't going to be comfortable doing something day one at your job, don't put it on your resume. Don't keep it on your resume, because while it was true that I knew Android and I had done Android at BMW, I was not expecting that, and so, that wasn't any, fault but my own. But the second thing I learned I kind of want to talk about today. So, I started working on Android, this huge app. It was this big app for this big media company that I was working on, and I do know Java. I know Java well, and I did know Android, but when I sat down to code, this is kind of what it looked like to me and what it felt like. I felt like I was behind mission control, and it was all these buttons, and I was like, I don't know how anything works, and Android Studio is really foreign. I was asking the developer, how do I run the code? I don't know, because even before when I was doing Android, I used Eclipse, and I didn't use Android Studio. And that's what, now the whole platform of Android has switched over to Android Studio, and that's what is preferred. And so, even though I did have those skills and I know Java, it was almost very, it almost didn't even help as much as how I felt lost in my environment, because I didn't know what any of the buttons did, and it was really hard. And so then I realized how much I'd been taking Xcode for granted. I was like, wow, all of that time I spent complaining about Xcode, no matter how many times I did Command-Shift-K, nothing would work. And I was like, I wish I had it back. And so I want to talk a little bit about us and Xcode. And I know we have a love-hate relationship with Xcode. I know it is the software we love to hate. And actually, when I went to download Xcode 7, I found this review in the App Store, and I thought it was hilarious, and I thought it was beautiful, and I hope it is read at my funeral. And so I wanted to share it with you guys. And it's titled, "One of the Worst Pieces of Software I've Had to Use." And this user goes on to rank all of the terrible software they've used, 1 through 5, and Xcode comes in at 3, right above Windows ME, right under iTunes, which they say literally nothing here works. And my favorite excerpt from that is this middle line right here. It says, Xcode is aggressively bad. It is a kind of badness you write poetry about. Generations from now, people will talk about how bad Xcode was. When great writers bemoan the woe of human experience, they are talking about Xcode. Whoa, like that's pretty heavy stuff, right? That's pretty dramatic. So I just want to set like the tone, like I get it, I know, we don't always love Xcode, we have our issues, but for the time being, like that's where we are, and that's where we live. So why not like make the most of it? Why not embrace it and do everything we can to make it awesome? Because, you know, at least it's not Android Studio. So some of the things I want to talk about today are simplifying and customizing your workspace, optimizing your app with instruments, and then also a little bit about what's new in Xcode 8. So with simplifying and customizing your workspace, a few of the things I want to touch on, kind of go over like the terminology and the views and like kind of what Ari mentioned yesterday, or no, what Craig mentioned yesterday about how when you first go to Xcode, there's all these panels and menus and panes, and it can be kind of overwhelming. Then I'm going to talk a little about shortcuts, and then also custom behaviors and code snippets. And so why is this important, like the terminology and like the menus? I've found that like if you have issues and you kind of Google like what's going on, like how do I do this in Xcode, especially if you get like a hit and you go to Apple documentation, the way it describes everything is with like the proper lingo, and it's like, well, I don't know what the like utilities like size inspector is, but I know what the icon that looks like a ruler kind of looks like is. So it's helpful to know these different things. So I just kind of want to go over it a little bit. So over here in the red, we have our navigator, which has 8 different tabs. We have the project navigator, the symbol navigator from left to right, the search and find navigator, the warnings navigator, the test navigator, the debug navigator, the breakpoint navigator, and the reports navigator. So basically, anytime you hear anything about the navigator, it's going to be on this side over here, and the red. And then the yellow over here is the editor. This right here is showing just like one editor, but when you have 2 editors, that's called like the assistant editor. You can also here compare with using like source control, so you can pull in like other commits and stuff using like those arrows at the top, which is also helpful. Over here we have utilities, and also if you're in like storyboard mode or making some interfaces, you'll have inspectors in these icons. Down here you have the library, where you can find things you might use in your code. And down here is called the debug area, which is split into 2 different views. Over here on this side we have the variable view, that's what they call it, because while you're running your code and debugging, you can kind of look at what variables are doing and what they look like. And over here is the console, which is just like the terminal in Xcode. Okay, so now that we have that all down and we're all on the same page, I want to go over some keyboard shortcuts and patterns. The reason why I like keyboard shortcuts is because it's a lot faster. Using the mouse can be really tedious, and it just makes you feel good, like when you can code and then do kind of interface with your environment without having to pick up your hands, especially when you're like a lazy developer, which I know none of us are, but sometimes. And then I also want to talk about must-know shortcuts. And there's so many shortcuts in Xcode because there are so many buttons. So I kind of wanted to break it down into like patterns that you can easily find shortcuts. And what you'll notice is that Xcode kind of breaks it down a little bit for us with how we talked about the different menus. So over here, like in the navigator, on this side of Xcode, you can pretty much get to everything with command. Command 0 hides and shows the navigator, and then 1 through 8 will cycle through. This is actually an old image of Xcode before they had 8 tabs over there, but 1 through 8 will cycle through all of the different navigators. This is, I don't own this. This is the link down here. So a user named Robert made this and answered this question. So if you guys would like to use this. On the other side, you can do command control to access a lot of that stuff. And also, usually 0 is like hide and show a lot. Like on the right-hand side, also command control 0 will hide and show things. The debug area, command shift Y, and so forth. Another like pattern that I would also suggest that people know is like the control bar at the top of the editor. And I call it the control bar because the way you access that is with control. And I do a lot of things with that tab bar. So here are some of the must-know shortcuts that I think everyone should know. If you don't know this already, and if you don't want to listen to anything else that I say today, just remember Command-Shift-O. That will help you open a file no matter where you are in your project. And actually with the update to Xcode 8, they've made searching that fuzzy, which means you can, if you have a view controller called like cats and dogs view controller, but you're searching for it and you can't remember what it's called, you might just type in cats view controller. It doesn't have to be all one word. It can find like the different pieces in the view controller, so that's really helpful because when we work with huge projects, we can't always like remember exactly what the name of files are, so that's become a lot more helpful. Reveal in Navigator is also a really useful tool that I use a lot, especially being on big projects with huge code bases, because when you get into debugging and you get deep into like the code and you're in a file and you're like, where does this even live on my project? Command-Shift-J will show it in the Project Navigator where it lives. So it'll, even if you don't have the Project Navigator tab showing, it'll go to the Project Navigator tab and highlight where in your directory structure you have that. Related items, going back to that control bar I was talking about, I use this all the time. Related items is if like you highlight your like a class name or a method or an object, and then you say control 1, it'll show related items, and that means like what calls this object, what uses it, what this object calls, which I find very important, especially if like there's something wrong going on with something. It's definitely a good a good jumping off point. And my favorite one, it might not be the most useful one, but I use it all the time, is the hotkey on your Mac for emojis. And this is useful in Xcode, so it's pertinent, but it's useful, but you can use it anywhere, not just in Xcode, and it's Control-Command-Space. So another takeaway that if you don't listen to anything else, this will just improve your life like tenfold, because it's awesome. So anywhere where you're typing on your Mac, you can just say Control-Command-Space, and the emoji menu will pop up, and then you can use your emojis right there, and that's awesome. Because that's what we all need in our life, more poop emojis. But yeah, so, and now you can actually add emojis into your code. I like to leave them in comments for my coworkers because, you know, it's a lot of fun. At least I have fun with it. So then to customization, which I think is a big part. Like, I think Xcode does give us a lot of ways where we can customize how we work, which we might not always take advantage of. You can remap keys and shortcuts. I know a lot of developers I know don't ever use the caps lock key because like that's not really a thing, a tool we use as developers a lot of times. And so they'll remap like caps lock key to be other shortcuts or maybe another command key, or if it's like, if you have like shorter fingers, like, and there's a command that's kind of far away, you can map it closer, which is really useful. You can adjust behavior settings, and I'll get into that later. You can make your own custom behaviors, and also code snippets I want to talk about. So when I say behavior, what is a behavior? A behavior is whenever Xcode performs an action, and then what that action triggers in Xcode. So if it's building a project, if it's running a project, if a build succeeds or fails, if you're running tests and the test run or fail, those are all behaviors, and how Xcode knows how to react to those either passing or failing. You can actually adjust your behavior settings, which I like to do a lot, and I'll show you how I do that. And then you can also create custom behaviors so that Xcode knows how to react to something that you want to tell it to react to. Like, hey, I'm going to make this become an action, and I want you to react this way. The way you get to behaviors, which we'll do this later, is just you can go through preferences of Xcode, but also right under preferences in the Xcode menu, it's right there, behaviors, and it's just like your wheel on the preferences menu. Code snippets. So this is like a really cool way to just kind of do copy and paste, but way better because you don't have to copy and paste it. It's just kind of like saving a chunk of code in your Xcode that you use a lot. And I'm going to demo that and a few other things for you guys right now. Okay, hold on. I want to make sure I do this correctly. Oh no, I did not open I did not open Xcode. This is fine. Oh, yes, I did. Okay, we're fine. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about are code snippets. So a lot of time the way you can see my presentation notes up there, yeah. A lot of time the way I organize my code is by separating it into like views or variables or like data source, especially with UI things and when your view controllers get kind of crazy. And so I use marks to kind of segment them off. And so what a mark is, it's just like this. It's great. So let's say I want to save this because I use it all the time, and sometimes I make them even more cool, and I like make a whole block, and it looks really awesome. I might add some like documentation, like this makes a cell, and then I'll name it like cells. And so I'm going to use this a lot because we have to segment code everywhere to kind of help us organize what goes where. So this is really simple. All you have to do to make a code snippet is if you just highlight what you want to make a code snippet. And then you have to click and drag. Really, really tough, you guys. And then drop it into this library over here that we talked about. And once you do that, a little window will pop up and show you like, okay, you're about to make your own code snippet. What do you want to call it? I'm going to say I want to call this my mark. And then completion shortcut is what you can type into Xcode so that it can autocomplete for you. And then I'm just going to say mark again. Okay, cool. And that's it. And now it's made. And so I can show you right now if I so if I just start typing mark, and then it's going to auto-generate like, oh, hey, this is your code snippet. And I'm like, cool. And there it is. So that's really fun. But also, I'm not always going to be using marks just for cells. So how can I make this better so that it's even more robust and even better to be reusable? And so Xcode actually makes this very simple. So let's say I want to put in a kind of like a hint where if someone is using this mark, I want them to know that they're supposed to enter in something. Like they're not supposed to enter in cells. You're supposed to title it like whatever you're currently writing. And so the way you can do this is if you go back to the library and you edit it, you can just click on the edit button right here. And it'll kind of pop up and show you the edit options. And all you have to do, instead of saying cells here, you just have to do open angle, a little hashtag, and then I'll say like section title. And then I'll do another hashtag and I'll do close angle. And you can see it automatically makes it like an editable text where someone who sees that will know like, oh, I should probably edit this. And then down here, I'll say something like, what is this? To kind of give a developer an idea like, okay, you should enter in whatever this section of your code is doing. So now let's see, and I saved that. Let's see what that looks like if I put it into my code. Okay, there it is. Cool, that's awesome. So I'm already highlighted in the section title, and I can start typing. I'm going to say cells. I'm going to tab over to that that other place where I need to edit text. I'm going to say this makes cells. And that's code snippets. And I use this a lot for marks, and I also use this for logging statements because when I'm like debugging code and I have to like, there's usually a huge like code dump in the console, and it can be hard to kind of go through that. So I like to make debug statements that are like my name or have like lots of exclamation points. And even though that's not hard to do, it's not hard to make a debug log or print statement. It's just easier so that it's uniform, and so I can easily just have what I know to look for in the console every single time. And so I also make code snippets for like my debug logs, which I find very helpful. Okay. And another cool thing about these marks also, going back to the control navigator, the control bar right here that I kind of talked about above the editor. Woo, right here. Okay. It's like, okay, right here. If you say Control 6, this gives, oh no, I said Command 6. Woo. Control 6. This gives you kind of an overview of the file you're in and like what's in it and what's happening. And you can see right here, hold on. Okay, well anyways, so you can see like with this mark that I have up there that it'll segment it off in this view, and so that you can easily kind of see what's happening in your project, like where your methods are, where your properties are created, and so that also helps you kind of organize your code and what's going on. So now I want to show you guys some behaviors, and this is, I think, one of the coolest parts of Xcode. So I'm going to edit some behaviors, and like I kind of mentioned earlier, and if you guys saw that, I just went up here to the Xcode menu, and then I just clicked right here to edit behaviors. So like I kind of mentioned earlier, over here on the left side, you have all of the different actions kind of Xcode knows to react to. So building, testing, running, frame capture, and that sort of thing. And then there are things in here where you can modify how things happen. So like if a build starts, you can make it act a certain way. So let's look at when a build succeeds. We all know kind of what happens there. And so it says notify using a bezel or system notification. We all know what that looks like. Xcode comes up. If we're in Xcode, it says, has a little hammer, and it's like build succeeded and everything is great. If we're not in Xcode, it has a little notification that comes to the top, tell you that it succeeded. And so that's what the settings look like for that. Before I worked for an awesome company that gave me a nice new shiny laptop, I had this awful, terrible computer. It was really old. I mean, it was a Mac, but it was really old and it was really slow. And I would run builds on my computer, and I would go and do something else because the builds just took forever. And you know, I would do something else on my computer. I would like leave, and then I would just like forget that I had been building an app that I needed to go back to see if it succeeded or failed. So what I did was I enabled this the builds to make sounds on my computer to like remind me like, oh hey, you're doing something, pay attention. So that was really helpful. And the way you can do that, you can enable play sound right here, and then it gives you some sounds to choose from, which are like your kind of preset system sounds, but also you see those right here. You can also choose a sound. So if you have sounds saved on your computer, and so let's see if I have some sounds on my computer. Well, it looks like I have a Drake sound. I really like Drake, so let's use that one. And of course, I not only needed this for succeed builds, but I even more so I needed this for failure builds, because that's when you really need to pay attention, like, hey, something has gone wrong. So I also made Xcode tell me if a build failed. And I'll show you how I do that. Okay. So Drake is there, but I should probably make it a different sound, because I should be able to tell just by hearing it that it failed and it didn't succeed. So let me show you how let's see. Oh, perfect. I have a sad Drake sound. We'll use that. Okay. So now I've kind of made my behaviors how I want them. I'm just going to change those two. You can see there's other options down here. Let me show you how you can add your own behavior. Create it completely new. So I'm going to call this coding, and I'm going to say that this is for when I want to just really dive deep into code, head down mode, and really get some good coding done. And I want to hide all of the stuff on the screen that I don't care about and I don't want to see. So let's see, I'm going to, I don't really need a project navigator if I'm really trying to sort something out. Let's see, do I want to show the debugger? No, I want to hide the debugger. I want to hide the utilities. Toolbar, I guess I'll keep the toolbar, and let's look at the editor. So this allows us to see the editor. So if I'm really coding, I probably will need two code windows up. So I'm going to say open the assistant editor. So let's see. And now you have to make a command for it, a hotkey, and I'm going to say command tick. And if I just press that on my keyboard, it captures it right there. This is actually one of the harder parts, is just finding a command that isn't already mapped to something. And you can override it. Like, it'll just prompt you, like, hey, like, this is already mapped to something. Do you want to override? And you can say yes, but I just don't like to do that because I will then confuse myself. Okay, so there we go. We have code mode. So let's see what that looks like if I'm in here doing stuff and I want it to look awesome. So I'm going to do command tick. Whoa, and everything goes away and it just makes it exactly how I want so that I can do coding. You can do this not just for coding, but let's say you want to have an interface building mode where it just pops up the interface builder, or you can have a debug mode where it brings up the debug area all the way to the top. If you're like running it, if you want to do that like on run, always make that bigger. So you can also do that. So yeah, let's see. If I run this, what happens? So that is my sad Drake sound. So Drake says I can do better, and I'm like, you're right, Drake, I can do better. Let's see. Okay, so let's see. So Drake is proud of me, and that makes me happy because I love Drake and I love coding, and now I love coding even more because I can combine the two together, and I'm a happy person. So that completes this demo, and I have more slides actually that I wanted to go over. I know we got kind of a late start, so I'm not sure how much time. Okay, cool. Got to go ahead. Okay, so let's go back to this. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about instruments. And I know instruments can be kind of a very daunting thing because it's like a kind of a black box to a lot of us because we might not always use them. But I kind of want to just kind of hit on the high points of the questions we have. So kind of just talk about what are they good for, do I need to use them, when should I use them, and how will I know which instruments to use. So here's what the instruments look like in your Xcode, and you can get to this from going to the Xcode tools and then go to instruments. And also instruments ships as its own app. Like instruments is also separate, which if you work on like a cross-platform team like Xamarin, you can actually use Xcode or use the instruments on your Xamarin app. As well as any other apps that you have. And they actually have this in their documentation, their official documentation on their website. So if that's something you're interested in, you could look at that and how to profile your app with instruments. And also, profiling is basically the term Xcode uses to, when they say like testing something with instruments, they call it profiling. So the purpose of instruments is not just to make your code better, but to kind of help you understand your code and understand like the hot points, like what might cause your app issues, and kind of give you like a overhead look of before like you ship an app and kind of see like, will this, let's say given all of this data, how will this work? So do I need to use them? If you're just playing around in Xcode and you have some projects, maybe you're just making some apps for yourself to use, probably not. If you're not dealing with a lot of data, if you're not doing any crazy like rendering or view things, you probably don't need to use them. But I would say beyond that, if you do use a lot of data, or if you do use like really intense view building things, and if you ship to the app store at all, I would say you should use them because I think it's better for you to find a crash or a possible crash before like a user finds it and before you get like nasty reviews on the app store, because I know we don't want them. So when should I use instruments? I feel like instruments should be implemented the same way we do like unit tests in an iterative way, so like kind of feature by feature. Because if you wait till the end, for one, it's gonna seem even more daunting and more scary. And then also it'll be a lot harder to pinpoint where the issues are. You'll have to comb through your app from top to bottom. Where if you do it feature by feature, it's a lot easier to say like, okay, this feature is slowing my app down, or this feature is causing a memory leak. And so I think that is the best way to do it. However, that being said, I know we are not always the best with doing things as we develop. So I would say it's better to use them at all than not at all. So if you do get to the end of a project and you haven't really run instruments, I would say just try to hit some of the high points before you ship it to the store. So which instrument should I use? So there's lots of instruments you can choose from. And it's, I think, one of the most important questions here. And before choosing which instrument, I think a preliminary step is like running your instrument and looking at it in the debug navigator we talked about. And this has 4 different options where you can kind of dig in and look to see what Xcode is already showing you before you even open instruments. And so it has 4 different views: the CPU, memory, disk, and network. CPU basically shows you how much of the phone's processing power your app is using. And then memory is showing you how much space on your phone your app is using. And then disk is how fast it's reading and writing from the disk. And the network are showing you kind of how your network calls are behaving. And I want to kind of talk about those first 2, CPU and memory sections, because I think those are 2 of the most used and the 2 most important to really check for. So this is like what the CPU looks like. You can see I was running this app on a MacBook, which is very powerful, a lot more powerful than our phones. So you can see like, oh, your app is not using anything, which is good. But this is what the view looks like. And then the memory one looks very similar. This is what it looks like. But it's also important to kind of know how to put these in a frame of reference to see what these graphs mean. So this memory use is kind of the one that looks like a speedometer, is showing you on a scale from good to bad on what Apple thinks how much your memory should use, memory your app should use. This is how much it's using. And then if it goes all the way to the red, which I've seen before, your app just crashes, like all the way to the end of the red. Over here, usage comparison compares how much space your app is using to other processes on the phone. And then down here, this is really helpful because this compares the processes on your app to all of the other processes that are running on that app. So this builds gradually as you use the app, and it's all in relation to itself. So here it looks really high, but this is just starting off. So if I keep going and like doing something even like crazier, this will go down, and then what I'm doing will go up, and vice versa. If I start to do like really small things, it'll come down here. So this is showing you like the closest level of all of the things happening in your app. And these 2 views both correspond to 2 instruments. That memory panel corresponds to allocations, and the CPU panel corresponds to time profiler. So if you are shipping to the App Store, I think what you should do is you should run your app and kind of go through like a less than happy path with it, like put in as much data as you can, kind of do the craziest thing you can with the views, and look at those panels and see how they react. Like, is your memory like going crazy, or is your CPU usage going crazy? And if it is, you should use one of these instruments. However, this is a talk about Xcode and not just instruments. You could probably do a whole talk on each instrument because they are really cool to play with. But if you do want to look further, I'd recommend you using this reference tutorial, which is a Ray Winderlich one, which goes very in-depth on those 2 instruments I just talked about that I think will be the best for us to use. So one feature that Xcode 8 brought that I really want to talk about are extensions. And extensions people I think were pretty excited about at DubDub when it was first announced, but then I think there was a little bit of trepidation because everyone was like, wait, what about plugins? So what are extensions? Extensions are things you can add to Xcode to make Xcode better, to add functionality that isn't there, that was not there yet. And people like us like other developers make those extensions for developers like us to use. So that's pretty cool. And now we're going to talk about plugins. So if you've been developing for a while, you probably know about plugins, which are similar to extensions, but they are apps that other developers have used that you can use with Xcode. And that's what they were called prior to Xcode 8. And what the difference was that Apple didn't really have a way for developers to cleanly make their own extensions. And so developers found hacky ways to make plugins. Popular ones were like Vim, like Xvim, I think that's what it was, where you could use Vim and Xcode, looking at you, Peter, and yeah, and there were good things about plugins. They had a really great manager, like plugin manager, called Alcatraz that a lot of people use, and it was a really great way to find plugins that you might need. But they did have some downsides, that because they were third party and not like associated with Apple at all, every time you upgraded Xcode, none of your plugins would work. Then you'd have to wait for the developers to update their plugins, and that was a little bit messy. So I think extensions will alleviate that, and while we are sad to like lose those plugins, I think we should look at kind of the bright side of what we do have. And if you are really missing a plugin, you should just go and you should make it an extension yourself, because Apple has made it really a lot easier for us to do that. So like I said, extensions help make coding more efficient with adding things that you like, more customization that other developers have found that they need, and it adds needed functionality. And I say needed because a lot of times I find like these extensions and I did not even know that I needed them before I found them, because I think we get so used to the like little annoyances of Xcode that we don't see them as an issue anymore. Like for example, with this first one, this is an import extension where we know like if you're coding and you're in Flow and you're about to add some code and you're like, oh, I need to import that module in here, and I don't like, I have to scroll all the way to the top, and then I'm gonna have to scroll all the way to the bottom to find where I was working, or like somewhere in the middle, and it's just, we don't want to do that. So this is a plugin where you can import from anywhere, and so you can just type import, and the cool thing is it still has the autocomplete for you down here. And then you just type it, and then you use the combined shortcut that comes with this extension, and then it sends it to the top with your other imported libraries. So this one's really cool. The next one is the equatable generator. And so I know when we make our custom structs and objects, a lot of times we have to make them equatable to each other to use them. And while that is like necessary and it might not be difficult to use, it is still a lot of like boilerplate code that's repeated and not the most fun thing to do. So here's the equatable generator, how that works. And you just have to highlight your custom, thing. And then you find the editor, and then you just, boom. And then it generates the equatable function for you right there. This next one, extensions localizer. Recently I was on an app that had to support 6 languages, which is a lot. And again, making localized strings isn't difficult, it's not hard, but it is tedious and it does take a lot of time, and this helps to kind of alleviate some of that, especially if it's the first time you're adding a second language to your project and you for some reason didn't use localized strings before, and so now you have to make all of your strings localizable. And this, what it does, you just like type something and you highlight it and you run a command, and then it creates your new localized string. And then the comment is just what it originally was equal to, and of course you can edit that. And so I really think this is cool. This one doesn't have to do with coding as much as navigation, but this is called Xcode Way. And what it is it adds directories straight to your Xcode that you can go to, like popular ones that developers use a lot. Like if we're going into the directory of the app that we're using, like the derived data folder. Instead of having to like fight with a Finder or Terminal to open it, we can do it straight from Xcode, which is really awesome. And an extensions reference for that is this GitHub, awesome Xcode extensions. There's lots of lists of extensions if you'd like to see more, and I highly recommend it. There's a lot of, even though Xcode 8 just went live in September, there's a lot of cool ones out already. And also, I would totally say to explore making your own extensions. And before I end today, I just want to see if there's any questions for me. Nope. Okay. Just so some takeaways that I hope you guys have, like utilizing Xcode to its full potential. Like I said, I know we all have our issues with it, but right now, like that's where we live, that's where we work, so we should really try to make it as good as possible and work for us. Here are some of my sources. And special thanks, of course, to Willow Tree. for sending me here and being awesome place to work, and we're hiring. If that's something you might be interested in, come talk to me. I can talk forever about my job and why I love it. So yeah. Also Drake, because he makes coding so awesome. That's him and his iPhone. Yeah, love Drake. Last but not least, of course, John and Ryan for bringing 360 item mini back. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity. And of course, Ryan for teaching me all of the wonders that iOS is and telling me I was doing life wrong when I was doing Android, because I never would have seen the light otherwise. But yeah, so I'm really grateful that you guys bring 360 item mini back. And yeah, if you want to get in touch, you can find me here on GitHub or on Twitter. I love to tweet, so you keep in touch. Mostly I'm just tweeting about Drake memes, but you know, that's how I keep myself entertained. So yeah, thanks you guys.